Welcome to the February 10th, 2014 work session. Work sessions are a more informal setting to update the council on business items. No votes will be taken on work session items. Tonight we have 4 items on our agenda. Public comment is allowed that is germane to an agenda item. If you wish to speak, you're required to fill out a public comment card and turn it in to the city clerk. Public comments will be allowed for a total of 10 minutes per agenda item and no more than 2 minutes per person. Public comment will be heard at the beginning of each item. Once the item is called, no other public comment cards will be taken. Do we have any public comment, Sudie?
We do not, sir.
Okay. Couple things on the agenda tonight. Want to move item number 1, discussion on City Hall property, to executive session. And if you guys are okay, I would like to take item number 4 and hear that first. Well, we've got Gary here and nobody else. We might as well do that one first if that's okay.
That's good.
Okay. So, Sudie, if you'll call the item number 4.
First item is discussion of the construction project at the Hopewell House. This is presented by Carter Lucas.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. You should have at your desk a handout with 3 plan sheets that will come up on the screen. I thought it'd just be a little bit easier for you to see those hard copies rather than try and follow it on the screen. But through this process, we had mentioned that we would come back periodically and update you on the progress of the project, as well as the current cost estimates related to the reconstruction and renovation of the Hopewell House. And this is one of those milestones where we've come to the completion of construction documents and wanted to bring that back to you. 1, to take a look at the site plan and the building configuration as it came through that process, and 2, just to update you on the costs associated with the project to date. So the first handout that you have is the site plan. This is the overall site plan for the project that shows the connection to Hopewell Road, the new driveway coming in, which would be 20 feet as opposed to probably a 10-foot drive that you see out there currently. The parking space turnaround at the front of the building, and then the septic in the back. What this plan also shows down in the lower corner, you can see the dotted lines indicate the impact on the property from the proposed roundabout project. So the intent of this was just to kind of give you an overall view of the project with the proposed impacts both from the Hopewell House renovation as well as the intersection improvement project. From a grading standpoint, you can see you also have that plan there. There's some additional grading along the north side of the property to get the drive in. That would involve some land disturbance along that, and we would have to revegetate that slope to get some of the tree canopy back in there. And then from a floor plan. So essentially with this floor plan, what it would be is from a activity, North Fulton Senior Center, Community Center, those types of activities would be limited to the first floor of the building. This particular layout, the front doors are at the top of the page, so the roundabout or the turnaround at the entrance would be at the top of the page, and you would walk in that existing front foyer. 2 rooms off to the side. Currently vacant rooms would be the 2 bathrooms for the building. Come back into the main parlor room. Would essentially remain unchanged. There'd be some minor wall modifications in that particular room, but the room would essentially look the same. And then the big building would begin to change as you move back into the building. So if you're familiar with it, you would come through that front 2 rooms and you would go into a dark paneled room. Well, it's currently a dark paneled room, which would be another parlor. That room would be, the paneling and everything would be taken down for another storage room to open that up. And what is currently the back bedroom would become the kitchen for the facility. So as you move your way back through the existing porch and through that parlor room to the lower left-hand corner of that page would be the kitchen and storage facility. And then a lower area which has the potential for being a bride's room for special events, and then the administrative offices over there off of the main parlor room. So then the project budget where we currently are now, when we started this project, we were working on a $700,000 base budget for design and construction. So far, we have spent $79,490 on the original concept study done by Precision Planning, and $75,500 for the construction documents done by Wiley Wilson, of which Gary Watkins is one of the members in our audience tonight. Out of these construction documents, we've got a construction cost estimate for the renovations of a little over $601,000. Construction administration from assistance from Wiley Wilson would be $40,000. We've got some alternatives in there: bathroom facility for the bride's room, furniture, fixtures, some things that we may be able to either do under this contract or find some alternative funding sources to provide. So we've broken those out a little bit separately there. That's a little over $59,000. And then the current cost estimate contains a 10% contingency, a little over $66,000. So from our original base budget for design and construction of $700,000, right now through construction documents, we're looking at a total budget, projected budget of $846,947. And so with that, I think what we wanted to do was to get some feedback from you tonight on this process. At this point, we would be ready to take these documents to bid to get some hard numbers and good construction numbers on this project. And also at that particular time, you'd have an opportunity, and we would be back before you for approval of any contract of that nature. So that would really be the next milestone that we would be looking to hit in this overall process. But that was kind of a brief overview on where we are with the project, and if you have any questions related to the project or cost estimates, we'd be happy to take them, and Gary's here to help us answer any questions also. Thank you.
I guess I'll start out. Where are we? The 75-5 construction documents, have those been completed?
Yes, sir. We're at the completion of the construction documents. So at this point, we are ready to go to bid.
And I'm just looking at that cost plus the administration, which you add the two of those, that's about 20% of the construction cost, which, you know, maybe an explanation on that's it's pretty high on a percentage basis of a project of that magnitude. And maybe, you know, Gary can address it, and maybe you too. I know we had talked about it before, but
yeah,
maybe an update on what all it took to get to that point.
Yeah, it's really kind of the nature of the project, and trying to understand the structure as it exists today, and then convert that structure from what was essentially an old residential building into a more commercial type facility that would support the senior center. The senior center being one of those particular type uses where we were really trying to be cognizant of the user and accessibility that we would have to provide to those types of users to make sure that the facility, to the extent that we could, was entirely accessible to the senior center. So there was a lot of work that really went into understanding the existing structure, how old it was, what was usable, what wasn't usable, and how to make that conversion. The construction administration is really one that we looked at on an hourly rate basis. So that will be really could be used on an as-needed basis as we work our way through this project. If we find that we can do some of those in-house and the process is a little bit smoother than maybe what you might expect for a renovation of a structure like this, that number could certainly be lower than what it is. But what we wanted to do is to make sure that we had enough in there to handle any unexpected circumstances that we may run into on a structure like this.
What about the actual construction cost estimate? Is that, you know, based on any, I guess you guys had gotten some original or some ballpark quotes, right?
We did, and all through this process, through the concept design process, and really prior to that, we've been doing some cost estimating along the way. And while we are probably a little bit over those original cost estimates, they've been pretty well in line with where we are now. I don't know if Gary wants to chime in on the basis for the construction dollar, but certainly can.
Yeah, wouldn't mind, and that, because that's something, you know, we all talked about. We wanted to try to keep that as tight as we can.
Right.
And to your point, and obviously with the 75 we've spent, but with the construction administration, possibly we could save some of that if, again, we all know that things go smoothly, you don't need it, but, you know, there may be an instance we do, but that may be something we can help save some money on, because we're getting way on up there for
Sure.
that project. So.
You are. Thank you, Council Carter. Thank you very much. Today I was looking at the original concept plan for the project that was done by another firm other than ours, and some of the things that were included in that. In fact, I was talking with Kathy a little bit about it right before the meeting. There are a couple of things that came into the project through working with Fulton County and so forth that were required of the project that may not have been included originally. For instance, an entirely new septic system. The septic system as it was in place, which might have been fine for residents, just couldn't handle the current or upgraded use. And so there were some things added to the project between the original concept and where we ended up kind of through schematic design and design development that actually added some significant cost to the project that may not have been considered in the original scope. As you could see from the site plan, as Carter put in front of you, the driveway, the turnaround, the amount of earthwork and so forth that was required to do that, all of which met emergency services requirements, turnaround radiuses for fire trucks and things like that. Considerable amount of work over what you would see there on site. So really, I think the change from a residential use to making it an assembly type occupancy, which it would be, affected some of those things that probably upgraded the cost a bit that may have been. I wasn't obviously part of the project team back in the early concept, but those are the things that typically we saw that were relatively new to the project that may not have been considered in the original scope. But again, all through the process and working with your staff, doing some detailed cost estimates, we feel pretty confident that those numbers are in line with the work that's required to make the project happen. One other thing that I might add in is a sprinkler system for the building. Again, that may not have been considered in the early concepts, but certainly for a building that has commercial use, public use that it will have, that was one of the requirements also. So all of those things kind of add into the cost, but I think in terms of the overall construction cost, it's about where we think we should see it, and for the amount of work that goes into the project, about where we believe it should be.
So you've anticipated the site cost and the paving and everything shown, as well as the sprinkler system and
Yes,
other things in the $601,000.
Yes, sir, that's exactly right.
Any questions, Karen?
I'm just going to be real honest. At our point in time, I don't think this is the best use of $850,000 of the city's money. Until we get our parks taken care of, which will be used by a whole lot of children and adults and seniors and everything else, until we get those built, I can't support spending $850,000 on something that has 20 parking places and may not get near as much use.
Okay. Bill was next, and then Matt.
I'd like to see the cost estimate on what he's come up with so far. I did go out there with Carter and with Bob, and he spent several hours looking at several different situations there. And I thought there might have been some cost savings by approaching the job from a different standpoint. And I don't know if those have been incorporated since you and I went out there or not, and if this estimate here reflects some of those different approaches.
It does. Excuse me. It does. It does not reflect a complete reconstruction of the floor system was one of the options that we looked at, but it does reflect repairs and updates to the existing floor system to get it to a usable state, and a state that we believe is sufficient for the potential use of the project. Given the cost and where we were with the cost, we just didn't feel like a total reconstruction of the floor system was, one, completely warranted, or two, was really within the budget that we had. So it does reflect some of those. It does reflect as many probably of the comments as we felt we could address. And so I think we've tried to incorporate those.
In the site work, does this reflect a balanced site as far as site work goes?
Yes. Probably the answer is yes to that, yes.
Yeah, I could see the site. You know, a lot of numbers is the septic system and then the asphalt and that type stuff rather than moving a lot of dirt. But
We had talked earlier last year about incorporating some of the site work costs with the intersection improvements.
Entrance
Is that
cost
still a
would be.
possibility?
It is, but this accounts for those being, the entrance improvements being included with the intersection project. And so the turn lanes that would be associated with the entrance are actually part of the intersection project.
okay, Matt?
I just wanted to concur with what Karen said as well. I think it's, you know, as far as the house goes, it's definitely historic. We've already made it a historic house, so the designation is such that we now own it. If we are going to do something with it, we need to do a good job with it now because there's no other option in my mind. But from a priority perspective, I agree with Karen as far as the timing of it, and I just needed to put that on the record.
Joe?
Yeah, so what state are we in? I understand everybody's hesitance to spend more than some, I don't know, amount of money. And one of the questions I'd like to ask is, because I remember, with the exception of Rick and Matt, we all voted to support the acquisition of the property. And I'm pretty sure we supported it because we all had something in mind in terms of what we wanted to do with it. I think that it's difficult for us to challenge the city staff to sort of inch along blindly in terms of what should they be doing, what can't they do, how much money can they spend, how much is too much. So I think, unless, Chris, you're saying you don't really need that, I'm thinking we need to give you a little bit better guidance than we can't support this, or some of us support it and others don't.
So if you look at where we are today, we own the house, you're right. We made some steps towards starting senior services in Milton, and that program exists today in a temporary location at the Community of Christ Church on Francis Road. We will have to move that program somewhere. That is a temporary arrangement. It is not designed to be the permanent arrangement. When we move forward with this project at this location, we're at a point now where we have construction documents and we're ready. Kind of the punchline tonight was I was going to ask the question, do we go to bid or do we not? Because to go to bid will make these numbers that you're seeing tonight become even that much better, and we'll have some sense of what they become. I'll remind you that, you know, we're talking about a number here on the screen, and I see that, and it's attached to an entire project. We are currently funded at $659,000, so it's not as though this project is unfunded looking for your support of $846,000. You know, when we get the bids back, if the direction of the council is to go to bid, then we'll apply that against the money that we've already budgeted and we've already programmed over 2 years to do the project. Well, obviously, if there's a gap, we'll have to close the gap, but the gap will be much smaller than $800,000. At this point, if let's just say the project came in at 100% of what was anticipated, we used all the contingency, added all the alternates, and ended up at $846,000. We'd be roughly $190,000 of funding in future fiscal years to close that gap. So that's where we are. We have a program, we have a facility. We're trying to work together to put those two. If we choose not to move forward with the project, I'm going to then look to the council to seek your direction on whether or not we just get rid of the property. It's not. There's very. We could open it up maybe as a historic building or a historic landmark, but if it's not going to really provide value to Milton, it's probably better off not one of our assets than if we choose to go ahead and get it open to the public. Right now it's sitting in a state where we own it and nobody's using it. So that's, I hope that was a good summary. What we're looking for tonight is, do we go to bid or not? Because we are ready to make these numbers real and make the project real if you want it.
Let me just say, and looks to me like we've spent the $79,000. That work, you know, if we ultimately move forward with it, that money is not wasted. The timing could be, and tell me if I'm wrong, but whether we start the project right now or 2 years down the road, you know, we've got that part done, the design. You know, the reality is, you know, this is all best case scenario. If we didn't use the contingency, if the construction cost estimate came in lower, if we, you know, we're down on the construction administration, you know, there could be $150,000 less. Now, again, that's being very optimistic, which would put us closer to the budget we had it in there. But that is, you know, it's a big number, and, you know, if we don't go forward, if we get rid of the property, we've wasted $79,000. But if we elected to either go forward with it now or wait a little bit, we haven't wasted that money. Correct me if I'm wrong, but taking it to the next step and put it out for bids is not going to cost us much money. And then when we get a hard number in, we could make the decision then to proceed or not proceed.
That's correct.
You know, that might be my suggestion. Just, you know, right now we're just saying the number looks high, but we're, you know, it's a shot in the dark number, or, you know, an educated number, but could be
That's right.
different. Bill?
And if we did let it out for bids too, there's always a opportunity to value engineer certain items out of the project, which would tend to lessen the exposure financially there too. I'd be in favor of putting it out to bid. I think there's a good market out there right now, and like Joe said, if we don't spend all of our contingency and all of our CA budget in there too, there are potential savings in it, which would get us back to our $659,000 original budget. I know it sounds like a bunch of money, but we've already appropriated it, and I think we've put the word out there in the community that we're moving forward on this facility, and I think just as with the parks, people are looking for use of the parks that are supposed to come online another year. I think there's an element out there in our city that's looking forward to using the Hopewell House as a senior center.
Let me ask you a question to staff. Refresh our memory on Fulton County's funding for Meals on Wheels, and, you know, there was, what, $300,000? Does that affect does that help with this, or is that more just operation?
What they've funded at this point is the operation of the center.
Okay.
So they've got, so it's their program and their staff in our facility.
Okay. What about Chris and I went to a Fulton County Commission meeting. I believe the number was about $110,000 that they owed us from back. They went back and did an audit, and we talked about with them of that going towards a senior center. Has that ever been?
Yeah, that was a concept that was brought forward, that after further audit, that number was really not $110,000. That number was a number much less. And I objected to it initially and said, I don't trust your audit. We audited ourselves, and their lower number was correct. And essentially, we ended up receiving like a $48,000 check.
Okay. But could that be applied to this, or is that?
Yeah, any expense or any revenue that would exist today in the general fund could be transferred to this project.
I just
capital
did.
project.
Okay, that was just a thought, you know, it was kind of a negotiating point. They didn't want to just flat out give it to us. Now, I understand that we've already got it.
The thing we could do is, if you do have interest in at least going to push the project forward and going to bid and finding out what those numbers are, when we would bring that back to you, we would bring back to you the funding strategy that would go along with it. So this is if there's a gap to close.
And I,
the reality is we might not have a gap to close.
I certainly understand points Karen and Matt brought up and the rest of us, but I don't see any problem. I mean, I think we're crazy not to go forward and at least bid it out, because we're making decisions now based on assumptions. you know, a couple of things could happen. The bid could come in real close to that. It could come in less and make this more appealing to move forward, or it could come in way high and, you know, totally change our strategy. So, Rick?
I guess I'd support what Joe had said, as far as if it's not really any additional cost other than staff time to put it out to bid, then I'd say let's go ahead so we have real numbers. I do share a little concern, I guess, and I'm still getting up to speed on kind of all the capital projects, but I know Parks and Rec has been something that we really want to move forward, which the whole community can use. That's why I'd like to see what the real numbers are and then see how that kind of plays into the prioritization of where we're spending our dollars.
And I'll also make clarification as well. I mean, I have no problem with us taking it to bid. I know we've had $650,000 appropriated to it. I just think that it would be in the community's best interest personally to, as a trade-off, take that and move it to some other project. Obviously, the council will make a decision as a body at that point when that point is done, but in my own perspective, from the trade-off as far as this particular piece of property goes, you know, we can't put money towards it as appropriate. I think we can use that money, though, that is appropriated to it now, more towards sidewalks. I think is just much more needed for safety of our citizens than this project right now, and that's where I'm coming from. So there's always a trade-off in everything we do, and you know, the money that's already appropriate to it, I think, could be used somewhere else. But I'm just saying that. I'm one member of a body.
Okay. Well, again, I think, as I said a minute ago, I think with everybody's concerns or thoughts on this, you know, moving forward to at least get bid in hard numbers would be the appropriate thing to do. Karen, you have a comment?
I was on record as saying I wasn't comfortable with the $600,000 number, so I'm really not comfortable with the $800,000 number. To me, it's not going in the right direction. I have no problem putting it out to bid, but if we do that and it comes back at this number, then we're going to have to make a tough decision of what's the best use of our money and whether or not, I don't think we ought to just scrap it and sell it, because I think it is a resource we'd like to keep, but it may be something we just need to put on hold and just take care of getting the parts done first, and then, you know, move to this as part of our long-term plan that we have in place that includes City Hall and public safety.
Okay. Anybody else?
Can I make one more comment?
Well, just to be on the other side of that, you know, whole discussion, I supported this when we first purchased the property. I support the improvements, and I look at this as an opportunity for us to provide, you know, services and facilities for, you know, a part of our population, part of our citizenry that normally doesn't get as much attention as the other. So I think this is I would say that this is a good use of our funds and good use of our time and talent, and I'm sure that the people that this would benefit would agree with that.
Okay.
I just, for the purpose of closing it out, since there's been reference made towards getting the parks done first, whether or not you decide to move forward with this project or not, I don't, as your city manager, don't believe that that's going to impact the funding of the park improvement that is scheduled to occur in the spring. So, you know, to say we stall this because that one won't happen, that's not where I think we are at this point. I think we're tracking well to have Memorial Park enhancements occur on time this spring.
Well, I did say sidewalks.
You said sidewalks.
But, you know, I think right now we're, you know, we've spent 90% of what it's going to cost to get to a point where we can get an accurate, you know, real number. So we might as well do that. And we are going to have that. We're going to have the same discussion. But then we'll at least have numbers that we know are very, very close. So, so I think the direction is to move forward with bids, and then obviously we all need to be prepared to have that discussion and which direction we go. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for being here tonight, Gary.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, we can,
I just got a text message from my husband who said Kroger is running out of food. If anyone needs milk,
Walmart is packed too.
I went earlier in the
There's
day.
going to be a lot of people drinking milk, eating bread, and drinking beer. I'm going to tell
He
you.
said Kroger is almost out of
So-
food. He said shelves are getting empty.
Well, Mr. Mayor, can we do number 3 next?
we can do number 3. Yeah, it looks like we've got a couple in the audience that may be interested in number 3, so we'll go ahead and move it up so you don't have to sit through longer meetings, so.
Get out before the ice.
Well, let me start this one, and then obviously we'll rely upon Kathy's experience. This is not a discussion tonight where we anticipated talking about the nuances of conservation subdivisions. I think you all know what generally that term means. Conservation subdivisions change development patterns, and they change development patterns in tracts of land where you try to take density that otherwise might be spread out and cluster it in the effort of preserving green space, right? So there's the 40,000-foot view of what conservation subdivisions are. There you are here. How about that? I've heard you, but I haven't seen you.
I didn't even know Ken was here.
But if I take you back, or several of you back, if I take you back to February of 2009, we had a fairly lengthy presentation on conservation subdivisions in this room by a gentleman who wrote the book Rural by Design, and talked about some of the things that conservation subdivisions did. And in 2009, it wasn't a topic that was largely supported by the council that existed at that time. There are good ways to do conservation subdivisions, and there's bad ways, and sometimes you in fear of the bad ways, you just choose not to do them at all. But I've heard this concept come out of your mouth, several of you, individually, not necessarily collectively, but individually over the last couple months, and I wanted to bring it to a forum that we could collectively say, as a council and as a city, this is a topic that we're really interested in evaluating and potentially implementing, because we've done a bunch of research at this point, and we are right at that brink of really using some resources and some time and some energy to bring forward a conservation subdivision ordinance that would work for Milton. I want to make sure before we do that that I've actually put in front of you the question, does the council believe that this is a good road to go down? Because the last time I posed that question was in 2009 in February, and it wasn't as warmly received. That's topic number one, and maybe we can talk about that in a second. Now, number two is Kathy and Carter and I had the opportunity to visit with the Department of Health, Dr. Harris, the director of the Department of Health, on Friday with members of her team to talk about the different options that the county has with respect to on-site septic, on-site sewage type facilities, and whether or not those could exist in some type of a community septic. We hear that topic thrown around, let's put a community septic thing together. Fulton County was very clear that they, as the regulatory authority there, only regulate systems that have a capacity of 10,000 gallons per day or less. So you say, okay, what does that mean, Chris? Based upon the house sizes in Milton, that means a community septic system could have somewhere between 7 and 10 homes on it. That's not a very large conservation subdivision, right? If we have 50 acres, we said, well, okay, let's be creative here. 50 acres, could we do 10 and 10 and 10? Could we do 5 systems of 10? And they regulate based upon the total gallons per day, not the total per system. So in 5 10,000 gallon systems, that to Fulton County is 50,000 gallons, even though they would be individual. And they would trigger it to go to the EPD for permitting and regulation. Not impossible, not impractical, just more of a process and probably more of an expense. Having said that, we're starting to peel this onion back and say, okay, that now is a data point we didn't have before, so that's good information to have. We're seeking out some perspective from the EPD on what their regulations would look like. Where we really get into starting to drill down into this is whether or not Milton, and I'll say it, might cringe like I did the first time I heard it, would want to go in the regulatory business itself on this topic, which we would have the ability to do if we wanted to provide that level of expertise and experience, if that was something we wanted to have as a local control in Milton. So I'm rambling and I'm talking. What we're looking for tonight is, do you like this concept? Are you really committed to it? Do you really want us to throw some resources behind it and bring you back some concepts of how we could implement conservation subdivisions in Milton, or this density clustering without sanitary sewer? Because that's the way true conservation subdivisions are done. But we don't have that infrastructure in place today. We can't get that infrastructure in place likely as quick as we would need to be able to affect the here and the now. I guess we're kind of looking, Kevin and I are kind of looking for some of that direction. And what, I'm not taking Kathy's agenda item and just ran with it.
You did a great job.
Well, let me to this. I think, I'll just speak for myself, and everybody's welcome to comment. I certainly like the idea of having that option of a conservation subdivision. As we move forward and we see some projected density and stuff that's coming this way, and, I think that's one way to handle it, to somewhat balance the concerns of the community and preserve the, look of Milton the way we all envision it. I don't necessarily have if one of the only options we have, if the city has to get into the business of regulating that, if that's an option, it doesn't totally, give me a ton of heartburn. The other option may be, and as Chris said, we don't have the infrastructure, but most people don't think everybody was concerned about sewer getting extended. But, 90% of Milton, even if we said, hey, put sewer there, nobody's going to put that infrastructure there. But there may be some areas that a conservation subdivision could possibly happen that are close to sewer, and maybe we have to make that decision. Is it worth it to, put sewer to that in order to save some green space? So, that I would certainly support putting some more time to really iron through our options and what we can do to make it happen. But I'll open it up to questions or comments. Matt?
I agree.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the link between conservation subdivisions and sewer. So,
Okay.
I mean, you can't be a conservation subdivision unless you have septic. Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
You can't, your traditional 1 acre lot,
Right,
which you need
right.
for your individual septic
Right,
tank, can't
right.
happen. You can either put it on sewer, or as Chris said, Fulton County Health Department will allow up to
Right.
10 homes or whatever.
Understood.
So that next option may be have a community septic that we.
Yeah, I thought I heard you imply that there was a direct link between septic systems of whatever size and conservation subdivisions, and that you don't go the sewer route, and that's what I was taking.
Normally, conservation subdivisions
Question.
are on sewer, which is easier, because
Okay.
you could take 100 acres
Right.
and split it up in 100 equal pieces, or you can, and here I'm suggesting that it's 100 acres of
Whatever.
flat land with no streams on it, and
Yeah.
all that other good
Well,
stuff
that's
that
for
hindered
conservation,
development.
or
But,
conversation.
100 acres, and you can break it up 100 equal squares at a time, or you can take that 100 acres, this is conceptual again, and take those 100 squares and put them on the same land area as 50 squares and preserve the 50 squares.
Right,
But you can't do
right.
that when you need the acre for the septic
Right.
drain field. And we did confirm with the county that they do not have any latitude on the 1 acre minimum with the septic
state?
system because of the requirement for the primary and secondary drain field. That they have seen and they've started to permit certain things less than an acre if they can guarantee that it will be covered by sanitary sewer within a 10-year period. So, they've had the ability to go down to 0.8 of an acre if it was scheduled to have sewer extended to it within a 10-year period. They were telling us that the average time that they're starting to see these drain fields fail and have to be moved is in the 20 to 25-year range. I got a whole lesson on septic system. I get way more visual than I cared to learn on Friday, but I kind of can tell you how they work now. So, typically it's with sewer, but since we
Okay,
don't have
all
that,
right,
we were trying
all
to
right,
figure
we
out a way
don't
to
have that option.
to do conservation subdivision with the infrastructure Milton has in place.
Okay. All right. Understood.
Joe?
Yeah, Rick?
And what we're talking about here is preserving green space by clustering or putting homes closer together. That gets us to the community sewer. We're not talking about increasing density from what we've got in our plan. It's just the use of the property. What Joe had said about the 1 acre minimum, this would be basically doing setbacks or whatever so we could preserve kind of the look and feel and have the homes be a little bit closer. So that's why we're looking at community sewer and those type of options.
Very, very similar to, and I recognize we have a moratorium on it right now, but this whole CUP zoning designation. One of the things that we've asked them to do when they come forward with that request for that rezoning is to show us what that site looks like built to the AG standard. Because then if there's 52 density units on that AG plan, then there shouldn't be 62 on the CUP. if it's used appropriately, it should be used to build a better subdivision, better aesthetic, better neighborhood than it is to jam density. And that,
Right.
Right.
that's
It's
not
just,
its
it's
use.
really changing development patterns, not the density.
Correct, okay.
I do have one question.
Matt, you can.
Oh, sorry. One of the questions that citizens do have, and I think it's just lack of understanding, but their fear is if you take 50 homes or 100 homes on 100 acres, for example, use your example, and put it on one half, and then you got the other half that's empty, their fear is what's to prevent that subdivision as an HOA or whatever from selling that other half to be developed in the future. And maybe it's just lack of understanding, but I thought we could discuss that tonight as well.
Yeah, I would, I'll start, and then maybe Kathy, then maybe Ken. I don't know that we would ever look to a neighborhood that would split something in half like that. I think what you really do is you look towards preserving a multitude of green spaces. And I'm sure there's some type of easement that can, or some type of something.
I'm just thinking more legal process, explain that.
What I'm used to, council member, is that as part of a precondition of a conservation subdivision is they are required to record a conservation covenant on the property, forever placing that property into a conservation status to avoid that very concern right there.
By which jurisdiction? By the cities, by the counties?
The city's zoning code would require it. Now, who will be the beneficiary of that covenant? I've seen it done different ways. I've seen the beneficiary be the HOA. I've seen the beneficiary be the jurisdiction, the
Okay.
city itself.
And there's a deed associated with that property?
There would be.
On
A
file?
recorded
Is that-
covenant, yes, sir.
Recorded covenant.
In
So-
the records.
At Fulton County, or? is that
Yes, sir.
okay.
They're Fulton County Clerk of Court Records.
Yeah, I'm sure, and we can also get some of those endangered frogs or something put on the property. Karen?
I actually worked with Fulton County when they were working on a conservation subdivision ordinance many, many years ago. And the reason why it didn't get passed in the North Fulton area really was based on fear. People were afraid that it would be used to get more houses on a set number of acres than they could get otherwise. Personally, I believe that if what we really want to do is to protect the rural character, we got to find ways to do it. Conservation subdivisions are a good way to do it, as long as we're not increasing density whatsoever. We just got to find a way to work out the septic issues with it. But I think if our ultimate goal is to try to preserve the rural character, this is going to have to be one of the tools in our toolbox.
I think what I'm hearing direction-wise is for our staff to explore this, to find out how we can do it.
Good deal. Happy to. We've,
And how we can do it to make sure that the residents realize we're not increasing density.
Well,
That's really
it's
important.
the second thing. Let's figure out physically how we can do it, and then we can promote, we can make sure that we get the, we'll have lots of discussions on it and make sure that that point is very clear.
we will be ultra transparent.
Yeah.
I also want to point out, just if you have any discussions, since this is a highly passionate topic amongst our citizens, that we've had apparently a citizen represent herself as a consultant to the city of Milton, to Fulton County. That would be a material misrepresentation because we do not have any consultants working for Milton at this point. So just want to put that on the record, that we've got to be careful as to what level we've got folks out there representing their connection with the city.
Okay. All right. Do we have a public comment card?
We do. It's from Mr. Walter Recook.
Which item is that?
Is
It's
it?
on this item.
It's on
Do you
this
want to
one.
hear public, since you,
I'm
will you
fine
hear it?
with- I'm fine with that. Are you guys fine with that?
Just this once.
Yeah, just one.
Oh, just because
So sorry. Well, I'm probably,
You're the only one in here to hear it.
I'm probably one of the few people that you'll meet that actually developed a conservation subdivision. And I built one, in fact, got the National Award for Best Design and Planned Subdivision Nation. I've offered to the planning staff, if they like to come look at the property, it's in Swanee, it's over 30% of the property is left as open space and shows how it does work. But as I will always tell you, on any project that any developer does where he expects to make a profit, it better make sense financially or else it's not going to get done. Gwinnett County is where this was developed, and Gwinnett County has a conservation subdivision. In fact, I was on the board that helped put that together. But at the same time, we started with the idea of having a giraffe, or started the idea with a horse, and we wound up with a giraffe. as our end product. And guess what? Not one single conservation subdivision has been built in about 10 years. So the question is, you have to understand what makes that product work. And I think that's something you have to understand if you really go ahead and analyze this, is what makes someone who wants to move into a conservation subdivision. That's the first thing. And I think what you'll find is primarily you're going to find that the area of any land that's going to be encumbered by a conservation subdivision is probably going to be over 100 acres. Trying to do something smaller just doesn't seem to work. Again, why should I sacrifice half of my backyard that I would have normally as a 1 acre lot subdivision to say, oh, I want somebody else to possibly enjoy it around me? It doesn't necessarily make sense. And at the same time, you say, well, it's going to benefit the whole community. Well, I'm sure many of you lived in recreation subdivisions where there is an area where you have communal space for swim clubs and tennis and a number of things where that's very much so, but it's not a conservation subdivision. It's something that's used by everyone for recreation. So again, I would say, look at what you actually have now. How much of your AG1 is actually getting cleared? I think that's the first criteria. Same thing when you look at these septic tank areas. You need to designate a land area for the fields. And you also have to include the cost of the sewer lines. Well, if you have certain valleys and such in your project, you may have to put a pump station in to pump it from one area to the other, or maybe the land doesn't lay right. There's a lot of little things. The other problem that we had in Gwinnett County is property owners, when you have an association that owns that land, they're only allowed to be in existence for 20 years under Georgia law. So you have to create a whole new entity to more or less take over and maintain that facility. It can't just be a property owners association. You've got to create something that everyone becomes a member of that corporation. The state also has a requirement that the lot size doesn't have to be an acre. And that's something that we could also look at. The state, I believe, the minimum lot size is, 20,000 square feet. Don't quote me on that. But there are some changes. Why is Fulton County going with a higher requirement than the state? And again, I just have to say, I'd be glad to take staff or any of the groups out there. It's a beautiful project. We had a 110-acre meadow, not a golf course. Most golf courses are about 100 acres, a good one. I'm not sure which ones everybody's associated with, but I believe even at White Columns, I think ours is around 130 acres. But again, it's something where you have to understand this project is a 110-acre large meadow. Over a third of the property was saved. It has many pocket parks, many lakes, many other things that were way ahead of its time. In fact, I worked with a naturalist to actually designate certain natural areas that we wanted to keep. We put up 100 birdhouses before the first house was built. We made the main street where there wasn't a single house in the main street, just so if anybody wanted to speed, go ahead. And we moved the sidewalks way back. So a lot of different things that made it very unique. Also won the award there for the best historic preservation project from Gwinnett, and got certified by the National Wildlife Federation and the Audubon Society. So there's some things that you can do by having conservation subdivision, but that was a 365-acre property. And a lot of things you can do creatively to make it work. It's hard to find property that large here in Milton. I'm not saying it's not possible to assemble it, but I think the days of assembling is getting harder and harder because money's getting tighter and tighter, not more available. I think you have to define, as I think the staff is looking at, where the areas that are most concerning us. Well, if it's view corridors, then that's what we need to protect. I too like to see more conservation subdivisions, but I think, again, unless you get larger acreages, it's going to be much more difficult. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Mr. Recook, can you just state your
Sure.
name and address?
Sorry, Walt Recook at 615 Scarlet Oak Trail, Milton, Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody good with directions?
I think I've got the direction. Yep.
Okay. Let's see, item number 2, we talked about.
Number 2, I'd like to meet with the mayor on, prior to public discussion on it, and I'd like to request the council move that to a published staff report to the February 19th council agenda. council agenda.
All right, and then our last item is item number 1, discussion of City Hall property, and we would like to move that to a executive session. So.
Correct.
Do we need to vote on that, Ken?
Yes, sir. We need the full motion, just like
Okay,
always.
Do I have a motion to?
I'll move to
executive session.
executive session to
Second.
discuss City Hall property.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous?
So
For the
we're
record,
allowed
let
to
me
do
say
that
that,
even though we say at the beginning of this meeting that no votes will be taken and no.
Yeah,
Okay.
the rules
All right,
specifically
that's fine.
contemplate it.
You can't vote in there.
That's fine.
That's the only one
Just
that
making
rules
sure.
speak to.
will adjourn this work session. Anything else?
We need to reconvene.
Okay, do I have a motion to reconvene?
Move to reconvene.
Have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous, and now I will adjourn this meeting.
Well, before you, don't go off yet. Are you still on before we do? Okay, so can I give you a quick update as to what we expect the weather to be?
Sure.
Yes.
You have some idea when people start to call you.
This is current information.
Yeah, it's current as of 5 o'clock. It's 4:45 this afternoon, which was the most recent weather update. We anticipate, based upon temperatures and rain and sleet and snow and what's all coming, to have really a non-event overnight. With some potential for some rain in the morning, rain converting to snow, and maybe a wintry mix at 11 o'clock tomorrow. Getting us through the ground is still anticipated to stay warm, temperatures high, so really no road problems anticipated tomorrow during the day. We'll see what we have tomorrow afternoon. Our preliminary thought is we'll probably plow once tomorrow afternoon at some point, depending on when we think the accumulation is going to stop, and then do a pass with some salt. Wednesday is a disaster. And it's a disaster because we have sleet that changes to freezing rain. They're anticipating 25-mile-an-hour winds on top of that. So I'm not necessarily on that day as worried about as much about a road event as we are about power lines and trees. And neither of those things we have any control over if freezing rain comes. So we've made preliminary plans with the schools so that we can call the Red Cross and they can activate warming centers at the schools if they need to, that are all on generated power. We're going to run our emergency operations center from Station 43 for the purpose of having the generated power in that facility that we don't have here. So we don't lose anything by being up there. We actually gain by being up there, because if we lose power, we'll stay running. And we anticipate the event to start tomorrow night between 6 and 7, where it will really get bad, get worse overnight, probably continue to get worse all day on Wednesday, and we hope to then start the thawing process and be back Thursday-ish midday, I guess. So if you were to say, what's the disaster time? 10 o'clock Wednesday morning until Thursday lunch is going to be, and it's not necessarily a road event, but these trees and power lines.
Did Fulton County already cancel school?
Yeah, they did for 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday.
So
Most schools
So
did.
Carter, go
Cobb
home and
did.
get some sleep.
We sent everybody home tonight. We didn't retain any staff in tonight because it really doesn't look to be any problem getting back here in the morning. We anticipate an open City Hall just as a normal course. I would be surprised if what's predicting, if it comes true, which is high likelihood it will, this building will probably not be open Wednesday and probably not part of Thursday.
Then we're back to normal on Friday, you think?
We're back in the 50s by the weekend.
Yeah.
Great.
It's supposed to get up in the mid-40s by Thursday afternoon. It's just,
This is one of those that we can spend a whole lot of time trying to fix it, or we can let 36 hours pass. And it fixes itself. The sun's free. So we'll use material and plows and stuff to make sure we get to the first response calls for service, public safety stuff. But this is truly one of those events that 36 hours is here and gone.
Okay.
I think by 6 o'clock tomorrow, there's not gonna be anybody on any road anywhere around hardly, so.
Yeah, nobody's going to take a chance after last
Right.
I guarantee you, the school children aren't gonna be on buses.